The Earth, fractured by years of political rivalry and centuries of historical wounds, was teetering on the edge of a new era. Technological advancements had made humanity a force to be reckoned with, but the old divisions lingered in the hearts of nations, companies, and even families. From the towering spires of the new metropolis in New York, to the sprawling tech hubs in Shanghai and the glittering space colonies orbiting Mars, humankind was divided by the very progress that was meant to unite them. The transmission came as a whisper through every communication channel, a cryptic pulse that vibrated with an unsettling intelligence. We are the Variks. We come not to conquer but to offer you a new path. Your world will be divided, and through that division, your greatness will be forged. The words burned through the airwaves, echoed in public spaces, and flashed across the faces of every screen on the planet. For the first time in decades, humanity collectively froze. Among the thousands who first received the transmission, Captain Elisa Hayes stood in a sterile control room, the glow of her monitor casting long shadows on her stern face. She was a soldier, strong-willed, resolute, and loyal to her nation. Yet as the message unfurled, her mind raced with a profound unease. The aliens spoke of unity, but their vision of unity was not the one humanity had struggled to build. They promised power, advanced technologies that could revolutionize energy, healthcare, even immortality. But they demanded something in return. Humanity would have to surrender its autonomy, its unity, and embrace division. The room buzzed with activity as politicians, military officers, and scientists scrambled to understand. Some believed it was a hoax, others feared the worst. Elisa, however, was skeptical. In her gut, she knew this wasn't a message of salvation. It was a test. In the coming hours, Earth's leaders scrambled to decode the alien transmissions. Some nations rallied together, but old grudges resurfaced, and soon the world was at a crossroads. Would they accept the aliens' offer, or would they refuse to submit and risk the unknown? A massive assembly was called. The world's leaders virtually gathered for the first time in history. For Elisa, it was a front-row seat to humanity's greatest crisis. But as she watched the broadcast, something gnawed at her. Humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their very identity, for the right to remain as one species, instead of falling prey to the predators who had already claimed too many civilizations across the galaxy. The decision was made. The aliens would land on Earth, and humanity would decide what to do next. The sun had barely risen when the first Varak vessel touched down, its massive, sleek form carving a shadow across the quiet landscape. No one had been prepared for what came next. It wasn't the size of the ship or the speed of its descent that shocked the world. It was the way they landed, without warning, without ceremony. Their arrival was as cold and calculated as the voice that had first reached Earth. The ship's surface shimmered, like liquid metal catching the light, until a hatch slid open, revealing a creature unlike any human had ever seen. Towering over, 6 meters tall, its smooth, translucent skin glowed with an ethereal light, an unsettling blend of colors shifting with every movement. The Varak ambassador stepped down onto the soil of Earth, their long limbs moving with an elegant precision that sent a ripple through the crowd of onlookers. Elisa stood in the midst of the small crowd, her heart hammering in her chest, not just from the sight of the alien, but from the weight of the moment. She had been chosen as part of a global delegation to meet the first Varak representatives in person. She had thought this moment would be historical, awe-inspiring. Instead, it felt like a prelude to something much darker. As the crowd parted, a holographic image flickered to life in the air above the alien, a three-dimensional projection of their home planet. The sky was alien in its hue, green and purple clouds swirling over endless plains. Elisa felt a chill run down her spine as the Varak ambassador spoke in perfect, unsettlingly calm English. "We come not as conquerors, but as guides," the voice reverberated through the speakers surrounding them, every syllable pregnant with weight. "We offer humanity a new future, one of eternal peace, prosperity, and knowledge. We shall divide your world, not to destroy, but to empower. Your Weaknesses shall become your greatest strength. Elisa's pulse quickened. Division. The words hung in the air like poison. It was a concept that went against everything humanity had fought for, everything they had struggled to achieve. Division meant conflict. It meant war. And yet, there was something alluring in the Varrock's voice, something that made it hard to dismiss them outright. This was no ordinary first contact. They were powerful, ancient, beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. For the first time, the weight of the Varrock's presence settled fully over Elisa. She realized they weren't just here to negotiate. They weren't here to help. They were here to manipulate. Division? A voice echoed through the crowd, coming from an American general who stood at the forefront of the delegation. His voice was stern, his face hard, yet the confusion in his eyes betrayed him. What do you mean by division? The world is already divided. We've fought wars to unify it. The Varrock ambassador's expression remained neutral, if not serene. What you call unity is a fragile illusion. Humanity has spent millennia in conflict. Your leaders have failed to forge true cooperation. Your strengths, your nations, can only thrive if they are separated and specialized. This is how you will ascend. Divide, and you will prosper. The strong will remain strong, and the weak will evolve. A shudder rippled through the crowd. Elisa's mind raced, her thoughts spinning in every direction. She could feel the tension mounting around her. Some of the humans present seemed entranced by the offer, their gazes fixed on the Varrock ambassador, lost in the alien's words. Others, like the general, felt threatened. This wasn't just a challenge to Earth's governments. It was an assault on humanity's core ideals. It was then that the Varrock revealed the first of their gifts, a device, small and unassuming, held in the alien's elongated fingers. The moment it was activated, the world watched as the device projected a stream of data, maps, technologies, blueprints for innovations humanity could only dream of. The device showed how to harness energy from the fabric of space itself, how to heal every disease, and how to extend human life far beyond its current limits. And yet, the conditions for these gifts were clear. Earth's nations would be divided. The powerful would be empowered, the weak would be left to struggle, and the Varrocks would control the flow of knowledge. As the Varrock ambassador extended the device toward the general, a shiver of hesitation passed through Elisa. She knew that this was the beginning of something that would change everything. Some would call it an opportunity, while others would call it betrayal. Either way, the price would be steep. Choose wisely, the ambassador intoned. You can take what we offer and submit, or you can fight. But know this, your world will fracture. Either way. The general reached for the device, but Elisa saw his hand hesitate. She saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes before he grasped it, feeling the weight of the decision. He had just sealed humanity's fate. As the alien left the crowd, the fear that had once been subtle began to spread, creeping like a shadow across the faces of those who watched. Elisa knew that the world would never be the same. This was the Varrock's game, and humanity was already caught in its web. Elisa turned away from the meeting, her mind racing. She felt a terrible weight pressing down on her chest. She had heard the stories of the Varrocks, beings that had fractured countless civilizations across the galaxy, leaving them in ruins. But she had never truly believed they could come for Earth. Now she wasn't so sure. The real battle wasn't just against the Varrocks, it was against humanity itself. Would they stand together, or would they fall victim to the very divisions they had fought to escape? The decision had been made. In the weeks following the Varrock ambassador's arrival, humanity scrambled to respond. The world's leaders, already fractured by politics, could not agree on a unified stance. Some saw the alien offer as a lifeline, a way to rebuild what centuries of war had torn apart. Others, like Elisa, saw it as the beginning of Earth's downfall. But the Varrock's influence was insidious, their promises of limitless power and knowledge hanging like a Damocles sword over the heads of every nation. The once bustling global conferences became battlegrounds of ideology. Elisa, now tasked with acting as a liaison between the world's military forces and the growing resistance movement, could feel the heat of the political fires burning hotter each day. The leaders who had initially hesitated were now swiftly falling into line, their hands stained by the alien gift they could not ignore. They saw division as a necessity, saw the fractured Earth as the only way forward. It was as though the Variks had played a masterful game, pitting humanity against itself before the first shot was even fired. But Elisa knew better. She had seen the way the alien factions moved, how they subtly whispered into the ears of world leaders, how they offered powerful nations even more powerful technologies, all under the guise of unity through division. The device they had introduced to Earth was just the beginning, a mere taste of what was to come. The more she learned, the clearer it became this wasn't just a power grab. This was an extinction event waiting to happen, one where humanity, divided, would collapse into chaos. All around the world, new alliances were being formed. Nations that had once been bitter enemies now aligned themselves with the Variks, willing to give up their sovereignty in exchange for alien technology. The first real division took place in Eastern Europe, where a coalition of countries signed an agreement with the Variks' promise of technological dominance. 2. The West South America chose a path of survival, accepting the aliens' offer of extended life and the promise of overcoming disease. Africa, torn by internal conflicts, saw the Varik gift as a means to an end, an opportunity to rise from decades of exploitation and poverty. Each new decision echoed like a ripple across the global stage, and soon it became clear that war was not just inevitable, it was the Varak's strategy. Elisa's role as a peacekeeper was growing increasingly difficult. Her conversations with allies and enemies alike were fraught with tension, filled with the murmurs of betrayal and distrust. Even within the resistance movement, cracks began to show. Not all humans saw the fight for unity the way Elisa did. Some saw the alien technology as a path to personal power. Some, like General Ivanov, a hardline military leader who had once shared Elisa's sense of duty, now spoke of using the Variks' weapons to conquer their rivals before they could do the same. They believed that if humanity could control the alien tech, they could dominate the galaxy. But Elisa knew this path would lead to destruction. Every day, more factions split off, their leadership seduced by the alien promises of power and immortality. In the United States, political corruption had spread like wildfire. The president, once a figure of strong resolve, now began to entertain ideas of using the Varik technology for personal gain. Meanwhile, in Europe, a group of scientists had begun developing their own projects, working in secret with the Variks to create weapons of mass destruction. The question was no longer if the world would fracture, it was how fast it would collapse. Amid the growing chaos, Elisa found herself seeking answers where she least expected, within the heart of the alien factions themselves. She began to learn that not all Variks were in agreement. There were factions among them as well, some that genuinely wanted to help, some that believed the division was humanity's path to ascension, and others that sought to manipulate and control. The more Elisa discovered, the more she realized that the real enemy was not the Variks themselves, but the inability of humanity to unify against them. Her team began to infiltrate the alien compounds that had sprung up across Earth. They had made small successes, uncovering data from a Varik-run facility hidden beneath the African savanna. What they found, however, was chilling. A weapon designed not for the destruction of humans, but for their total control. The Variks were not simply dividing the world. They were actively changing the genetic structure of humanity, offering selective upgrades to those who pledged loyalty to their cause. The technology they had promised to heal humanity of its diseases now came with the catch of permanent alien influence. Subtle, invasive, but inevitable. Elisa stood before her team in the small, dimly lit command center, the weight of the discovery crashing down on her. She turned to General Ivanov, who had grown ever more distant and consumed by his newfound thirst for power. "We can't fight them like this, Ivanov. This isn't a war we can win with weapons. This is about survival. They want to change us, divide us into pieces that can never be whole again." He turned to her, a dark smile creeping across his face. Maybe that's exactly what we need. The Verox gave us the power to change things. It's time to take control of our destiny. But Elisa knew that Ivanov wasn't seeing the full picture. If the world didn't come together, if they didn't unify, the Verox would have already won. And once humanity was divided, there would be no way back. As the days wore on, Elisa grew desperate. The resistance had to act fast. She reached out to the remaining leaders who were still resistant to the alien influence, urging them to join together, unite against the coming storm. But with each passing day, she watched as more factions formed, each one claiming a piece of the world, each one seeing their own gain in the Verox promises. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the scent of betrayal and greed. The world was on the brink of a civil war of unimaginable scale, and Elisa knew that, unless they could stop the Verox influence from spreading any further, humanity would never again be whole. The weight of the responsibility felt heavier with each passing moment, yet it was clear. Elisa and her allies would have to make their stand soon, or there would be no world ally left to save. And deep in the shadows, the Verox watched, knowing that humanity was already unraveling. The real question now was whether the seeds of division they had planted would take root, or if, against all odds, humanity would rise up and prove them wrong. The world was unraveling faster than Elisa could track. Cities that had once been symbols of unity and progress now lay in ruins, crumbled beneath the weight of betrayal and alien manipulation. The factions, driven by greed and fear, had splintered into warring states, some aligned with the Verox, others desperately clinging to their fractured ideologies. Humanity's greatest strength, its unity, had turned into its greatest weakness, and Elisa was caught in the storm. It was in this chaos that the final confrontation began. Elisa stood on the bridge of the Resistance flagship, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating beneath her boots. Before her, an armada of ships assembled, human, alien, and hybrid, formed from the remnants of different factions that had rallied to the cause. This was the last chance for humanity, a single, unified force, united in a final stand against the alien factions who had manipulated them into war. The Verox were not a singular force. They had come in fractured groups, each with a different vision for Earth. But they had grown more coordinated over the past few weeks, using the rifts between the human factions to their advantage. The Resistance knew that if they didn't strike, now, Earth would be lost to the Verox forever. Elisa's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the enemy fleet take shape on her monitors. There was no turning back now. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the soul of humanity. "We don't have much time," Elisa said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "If we don't strike now, the Verox will consolidate their power. They've already begun the second phase of their operation. They'll control Earth, not through domination, but through division. We can't let that happen." Her voice echoed through the command room, met by the stoic faces of her team. They had been through hell together, fighting, losing, and regaining ground. But this was different. This would decide whether Earth remained a whole, vibrant world or became a fractured, controlled experiment under the Verox rule. Elisa turned to the tactical officer. "Prepare for assault. We're going to hit them where it hurts before they complete the integration process. We need to destroy their command ship before they can trigger the final wave of upgrades." The officer nodded, eyes sharp. "We're ready, Captain." It was a bold strategy. One of the Verox's most powerful weapons wasn't their superior technology, but their ability to manipulate humanity through the promise of personal gain. They had given certain leaders the keys to unparalleled power, convincing them that only by dividing Earth into competing factions would humanity reach its full potential. The Verox had never sought total domination, just control through division. The fleet surged forward, the stars themselves seeming to dim as the ships sliced through the darkness of space. Elisa's thoughts swirled. Could humanity come together? In time? Or would this final battle be for naught, a mere echo of what could have been? In the distance, the Verak flagship loomed. It was a massive structure, an eerie combination of organic and synthetic, its dark surface reflecting the stars. But it wasn't just the ship Elisa focused on. It was the holographic network that surrounded it, transmitting the alien control systems that had been embedded in the minds of those who had accepted the alien gifts. As they closed the distance, the battle began. Laser fire streaked across the black void, explosions rocking the resistance fleet. Elisa's hands gripped the command chair as her ship bucked under the force of enemy fire, alarms blaring. "We've got incoming," shouted her communications officer, his voice strained with urgency. "Enemy drones swarming in. There, trying to block us from reaching the flagship." But Elisa remained calm, her mind cutting through the chaos. "Break through the perimeter. We don't have the luxury of time." Her crew moved with precision. The ship rocked again, but they held their course. The drones, robotic swarms sent by the Veraks to protect their flagship, were fierce and relentless. But the resistance had an advantage: the unity of purpose. Despite the fractures among human factions, the one thing they had learned in the face of alien manipulation was that humanity's true strength lay in its adaptability, its ability to improvise under pressure. The resistance pushed forward, a final, all-or-nothing assault. Elisa felt the weight of every choice, every sacrifice that had brought them here. It wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could rise above its fractured past. Then, just as they neared the flagship, something unexpected happened. The Verak flagship's defensive systems flared, and the entire battlefield seemed to freeze. The holographic network that had been controlling the minds of the humans in power suddenly flickered, a crack running through its intricate web. The aliens weren't just controlling Earth through technology. They had been manipulating human minds on a deeper level, altering their very DNA in subtle ways, turning them into more than just allies, into unwilling pawns. And that was when Elisa understood. The Veraks hadn't just been dividing humanity, they were changing humanity. Those who had accepted the alien gifts were being altered, slowly and insidiously, becoming something less than human, more akin to their alien overlords. But the cracks in the system had started to show. The very act of rebellion had caused a disruption in the alien influence. Elisa's tactical officer shouted in disbelief. "Captain, the humans who accepted the Verak gifts, they're rebelling. They're fighting back against the control." It was the turning point they had been waiting for. The last vestiges of alien manipulation faltered, and the humans who had once been pawns in the Verak game were now reclaiming their will. The resistance surged forward, pushing back against the Verak's forces. "Now we strike," Elisa commanded, her voice hardening with determination. The final push was brutal. The resistance fleets broke through the Verak's defenses, targeting the heart of their flagship. Elisa watched as the massive ship began to buckle under the assault, its systems destabilizing. The alien force that had so carefully woven itself into Earth's political fabric was finally losing its grip. But even as the flagship began to fall, Elisa knew the cost had been steep. The battle was far from over. The Veraks were not gone. They were retreating, regrouping, and somewhere out there they were planning their next move. As the flagship's core exploded, sending shockwaves through space, Elisa looked out the window of her command deck. The stars seemed a little brighter now, a little more hopeful as humanity, united at last, was given a second chance. But the road ahead was uncertain. The victory was hard won, and Elisa knew it was only temporary. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. But for now, humanity had won. Against all odds, against division and manipulation, they had held their ground. And that victory, fragile though it may be, was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And deep in the shadows of space, the Veraks watched, knowing this was far from the end. The aftermath of the battle was both a relief and a heavy burden. Earth, fractured but not broken, had survived the alien threat. The Verak flagship, once a symbol of their dominance, lay in ruins, its shattered remains scattered across the void. The fleets of humanity, once divided by ideology and self-interest, now found themselves united by the common struggle they had just endured. But despite the victory, a sense of loss lingered in the air. Elisa stood on the observation deck of the Resistance flagship, watching the wreckage of the alien ship as it drifted slowly toward a distant moon. The battle had been won, but at a steep cost. Many lives had been lost, and the scars of the conflict would remain for generations. Still, humanity had proven something essential that day. It could still come together when faced with the gravest of threats. Below her, the ship's crew went about their work, cleaning up the debris of war, securing the survivors, and processing the intelligence they had captured from the Verak flagship. The war was over, but the real challenge was only beginning. Earth had been saved, but it had also been irrevocably changed. Elisa turned away from the window, her thoughts swirling with the enormity of what had just transpired. She had led humanity through a time of division, seeing firsthand the incredible resilience and adaptability that humans were capable of when they set aside their petty differences. It was a lesson learned the hard way, but it had come with a profound truth. Unity, forged in the fires of adversity, had the power to overcome even the most insidious of forces. The Resistance, now a new coalition of Earth's nations, was already planning for the future. The survivors from the alien factions, those who had once been manipulated into aiding the Veraks, were working side by side with the humans who had fought back. The hybrids, those whose genetic makeup had been altered by the Verak technology, were struggling to understand what they had become. Their minds, still partially under the influence of the alien DNA, were a ticking time bomb. But for now, they were allies. Whether that would remain true in the future was still uncertain. Elisa knew that the struggle for true unity was far from over. There would be rebuilding, both physical and ideological. The borders that had once divided nations, cultures, and peoples had been blurred in the chaos of war. But the very fractures that had allowed the Veraks to divide humanity were not healed overnight. The tensions between the factions that had accepted the alien gifts and those who had rejected them still simmered, threatening to tear the fragile peace apart. As the days passed, Elisa worked tirelessly to guide the negotiations between the human factions, striving to mend the wounds that had been opened during the war. The Verak influence had left deep scars not just in the land but in the hearts and minds of the people. Many wondered if they had been changed forever. Were they still human, or had they become something else entirely? Humanity, once united by a common struggle against alien oppression, was now faced with the challenge of maintaining that unity in the face of their own internal divisions. The war had proven that unity was possible, but it had also exposed how fragile it was. Elisa knew that the real fight for Earth's future was not just about surviving alien threats. It was about healing the fractures that had been exposed during the conflict. The world was not healed, not yet, but the potential for healing had been forged in the fire of their shared battle. The hope that had been born from the ashes of war was fragile, but it was real. Elisa believed that humanity could overcome the divisions that had so nearly destroyed them. They had done it once before, and they could do it again. And somewhere deep in the vast stretches of space, the Veraks watched, their forces retreating further into the darkness, silently acknowledging that humanity had proven itself far more resilient, far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. The alien influence was gone, for now, but Elisa knew the struggle wasn't over. The future remained uncertain, but humanity had learned something crucial during the war. The real power didn't lie in the technology the aliens offered, nor in the promises they made. It lay in humanity's ability to adapt, to come together, to overcome division and to rise, stronger, united and determined to survive. Elisa stood at the helm of a new Earth, the weight of the future pressing down on her shoulders. But for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. Humanity had been tested, and it had passed. The days that followed the great victory were filled with a quiet hum of activity. Earth's leaders, now bound by a shared sense of survival, set to work on rebuilding what had been lost. The cities that had once been war zones slowly began to pulse with life again. People rebuilt their homes, their families, and their future. But the damage done to the fabric of society wasn't so easily repaired. The scars ran deep, and the shadow of the Verax still loomed over humanity. Elisa, now a symbol of resistance and unity, continued to serve as a guiding force. But her thoughts often wandered, even as she worked tirelessly to help her world heal. She knew that the alien threat had been pushed back for now, but what had been learned was impossible to ignore. The Verax weren't the only ones who knew how to manipulate and divide. Humanity had learned the hard way that its own internal fractures could be exploited just as easily. The new coalition that had emerged from the ashes of the war was not without its tensions. Some of the factions that had sided with the Verax, either out of desperation or for personal gain, struggled to reintegrate into a world that no longer trusted them. Their acceptance of alien gifts, technology, longevity, altered genetics had left them with changes that were not so easily reversed. Though some embraced the opportunity to rebuild, others found themselves growing distant, struggling with the internal conflict of their altered minds. Humanity wasn't just healing from the war, it was healing from itself. In the quiet corners of the New World, whispers had begun. Whispers of the Verax's true plans. They hadn't simply divided humanity, they had seeded something deeper, something within the very fabric of Earth's future. Elisa's eyes drifted over the horizon, the weight of it all pressing on her once again. The peace was tentative, fragile, and it always had been. As her gaze fell upon the green fields of a world on the mend, she felt the weight of her role in the coming years. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a leader in the truest sense. And it was clear that her fight, humanity's fight, wasn't over. Somewhere, in the far reaches of space, beyond the edges of the known universe, there were still echoes of the Verax presence. Their fleet, though defeated, had not been destroyed. They were retreating, regrouping, perhaps planning their next move. Elisa knew that the war she had fought, the one humanity had won, was merely the first battle in an ongoing struggle for survival. Humanity had proven itself resilient. But resilience alone wasn't enough. Earth had to remain vigilant, prepared for whatever was to come. The Verax had tested them, but Elisa believed they had only scratched the surface of what was truly possible for humanity. There was strength in the unity they had fought for, and in the sacrifices they had made. But there was also something else, something more dangerous. The spark of potential that had ignited across the globe, and so the future stretched out before them, uncertain and fraught with both peril and possibility. Humanity had survived its greatest trial yet, but the question remained: could it thrive, or would it repeat the mistakes of its past? As Elisa stood at the threshold of the next chapter, one thing was clear: the journey had only just begun. In the vastness of space, a single transmission flickered on an encrypted channel, a message from an unknown source. "We have seen the potential of your species. The real test is yet to come." Elisa's heart skipped a beat as she turned toward the distant stars, a deep, unsettled feeling washing over her. The Verax were gone, for now, but the real threat, the true challenge, was still out there. And humanity, united as one, would have to face it. Together.